Hey everyone.
Hello.
Hey, Mia, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
How's it going?
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
Oh, I just saw your email.
Yeah.
Looks like you got into the
I did.
because yeah, we did this webinar like starting May 26th. I think that's why it said schedule for May 26th. But yeah, it's a weekly recurring calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All good, all good. Yeah, I just wasn't sure.
Anyways, so yeah, I think I emailed you this morning, but you wanted one of the other speakers to drop out. So you be the only speaker of the session. So yeah, feel free to take longer than 20, 25 minutes if needed. And then we can have like a full Q&A towards the end.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have more than maybe like half an hour at most, but I'll just fill in the time with just some jokes, I guess. And
yeah, 30 minutes is perfect. I think we can reschedule, but next session can be a bit longer.
Yeah. I'll go through the stuff that I wanted to go through, and then best or worst case scenario, depending on how you look at it, people get 30 minutes of their life back. And then we'll go from there. We'll go from there.
Yeah, perfect.
Cool.
Okay, yeah, so it looks like we will start trickling in. I will start sharing my screen real quick to walk through the webinar format, and then I will let Mihail share the screen. Give me 1 second. So yeah, this is the Multimodal Weekly webinars hosted by the team over here at Labs. We met every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. And here are some of the topics that we want to cover on a weekly basis. So we have speakers who talk about news research topic in multimodal AI. There are folks who talk about innovative multimodal application in different verticals. Since we focus a lot on video, there's people who are excited about video and multimodal technology in general, and they come here to share their work, as well as the infrastructure technology to support those video projects. Sometimes we have team members from Storia Labs to come and give tutorials and guides about video technology as well. In previous session, we have a wide range of speakers who talk about different topics, application of multimodal AI in healthcare, multimodal vector search, research on vision language retraining, diffusion models, etc. So today we'll have Mihail Eric, who will talk about his work on Storiaboard. We're supposed to have another speaker, Karina, to come in, but she got sick this morning, and that's why we have to reschedule her for next week. So Mihail is going to be the only speaker of today's, but I'm super excited to hear him talk a bit more about his company, Storia AI. I want to give a quick background about Mihail first before we get started. So just take a look at your website. I think you have a wide ranging application, right? So Mihail is an engineer, a researcher, an educator that helps start teams in innovative organizations like Amazon Alexa and iOS. He's currently a co-founder of Storia AI, and you guys are building an AI-powered creative assistant for fast and delightful video production. In the past, he have run a consultancy to help companies across verticals deliver machine learning in their driven solution to the hardest problem, with a special focus on NLP, recommendation system, tabular data, and computer vision domain. He also built Confetti AI, which is the premier educational platform for training the next generation of machine learning practitioners. And that platform was acquired by Taurus AI. And I believe you also spent several years at Stanford in the NLP group, right? When you work with a lot of the pioneers in the field, like Chris Manning and Percy Lang, right? Some of the folks who, I guess, like pioneered so few foundation models, large language model in some sense. And he also did a lot of great writing, a couple of blog posts that achieved a lot of good impression in how can you use things like MLOps and setting up ML projects, the focus on data engineering, etc. Yeah, so that's a lot. That's a quick background check on me. I just make sure that he knows. We have definitely have a sheet today. So feel free to send your question on the chat as you listen to him, and then we'll have a short Q&A session towards the end when he's done. Perfect. So with that, I let Mihail start sharing the screen and walk us through his journey with Storia AI.
Sure. Yeah, let's see. So should I make this interactive, or should I just wait at the end for questions? I usually go interactive, but I want to honor the
let's do it interactive. I think because you're the speaker today, so I think we can be more flexible. Yeah.
Sure. Sounds good. Yeah. So I'll preface that by saying I'm going to show some slides, do a live demo of the product that we put out, and then please do stop me. I want this to be engaging. I also want to encourage people to really push to get what they want out of this. So, I would love to make it as engaging as possible and have just folks, ideally not get bored. That's sort of my goal for the talk. I will start by saying just thank you to James for the invitation, and thank you to 12 Labs just in general for putting together this series. I think it's a really, really cool effort, very, very smart effort. I think it's important to have forums like this to discuss the latest and greatest in technology, and 12 Labs seems to be doing really, really awesome work in a lot of this video understanding, which I think is fantastic, and I really think will change the world as we know it. So big fan of the work you guys do, and thank you again, James, for the invitation. That's very, very kind. So all right, I will hop into a quick set of slides, like I said, and the slides I'll at a high level should talk through sort of how we got our start, what exactly we're trying to tackle with Storia, and then I'll show a quick demo. And again, please stop me at any point if something isn't clear, and I'll stop periodically throughout the slides. Let's see. Okay. All right, does everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. I'll start off by saying, I'm one of the co-founders of Storia, and our high-level pitch is to build contextual intelligence for storytelling. And we have been working on the company as it stands about 9 to 10 months. I would say, well, if you really go back to the origin story, we had a little bit of an uncharacteristic entry into this whole world of what has now become pre-visualization and pre-production as a focus. The real genesis story of our company is we were kind of building some random projects back in October, November of last year. And one of the projects that we put out was this tool called Rick and Mortify. And Rick and Mortify was, if people are familiar with the Rick and Morty TV show, my co-founder Julie and I were really big fans of the show. And we put together this application where people could go on, provide a premise for maybe a new episode of the show, pick out characters from the show that they like Morty or Rick or Summer. And then we would use generative AI, both textual and language-based, to create a story along with dialogue and just plot elements, and then accompanying visuals for each of the elements of that story. And so it was effectively like a mini comic strip that we put together. And we put this out there. It got really, really popular. People love the Rick and Morty TV show, so they used it a lot. And one of the really nice, outside of just the virality of the application, one of the nice things that fell out of this was that we were actually reached out to by a director who really liked the application and was like, hey, this could be interesting for some other stuff in broadly video production and specifically video pre-production. And that's how we fell into what has now become our focus on storyboarding. And I'll talk about storyboarding, what that really means. But I also want to say that there's a broader goal, a broader set of problems that we're trying to tackle that we uncovered as we went deeper down the rabbit hole of what generative AI could mean for video production. So that's a little bit of our origin story. And now we're at a very different place as a company, focusing less on Rick and Morty and more on real world problems. But I'll just wanted to preface it with that. Just a really quick background on who we are as a team. So as James mentioned very kindly, I am a technologist. I've been in AI for a while, worked on a variety of different things in different organizations, and have been fortunate to work on a lot of pioneering work in AI applied to language and also some multimodal aspects. My co-founder Julia is also a very deep technologist that has built a lot of the technology powering tools like BERT, if you're familiar with BERT, and some of the underlying technology behind Bard, right? Google's ChatGPT competitor. And we're really fortunate to be backed by a lot of creative and technology leaders, folks that have really, serial entrepreneurs, as well as just folks that are very deep into the entertainment media space, directors, award-winning filmmakers, et cetera, folks that really helped us to round out some of our efforts as we go into applying generative AI to some of these problems. So I'll start by saying just one really quick point here, which is that generative AI has certainly blown up in the last year, though it has been around longer than a year. But now a lot of the focus has been generative AI. And one of the really compelling use cases for generative AI has been this idea of storytelling, and storytelling in different forms, whether that's visual, audio, textual. It goes without saying that really the tools and technologies that we're building out are completely revamping how people think about storytelling. And that's something that we kind of felt this hypothesis is something that really resonated with us, and something that we think will play out moving forward. And that is really one of our big bets, is that generative AI will change completely how people tell stories, whether that's video-based or other modalities as well. But the reality is, and this is where we think there's a big problem, is that existing generative tools that we maybe see out there, they don't really allow you to unfold a more cohesive long-form narrative in a story. And so really what that means is when we look at tools, maybe like a lot of the text-to-image providers, they're really nice single-point solutions, but they don't really allow you to play out a longer story, right? Where there's context that needs to be preserved, where there's information about characters that needs to be preserved, there's information about style that needs to be preserved. And that is really going to be one of the key unlocks that we have to figure out before we're able to deliver on the promise of generative AI when it comes to storytelling. So this is really some of the core stuff that we've been thinking about. And where that has sort of manifested itself more concretely is we know that there's become this common paradigm for how to interact with generative tools today. A lot of this like text to X, right? Whether that's text to image, text to video, text to whatever, and you provide a prompt, you get an output back. And that's all nice and good. But the reality is that when it comes to actually crafting a story completely, it's more involved than just, hey, I'll provide you a prompt and you can just, you have everything you need to exactly build what I want. It is actually a little more involved than that. And the way to sort of ground that effort is imagine that you are, like a Stan Lee, right, of like the Marvel universe, and you're trying to come up with a story for the Spider-Man, right? I mean, this is, iconic character of iconic superhero character. And let's say that you really just went to like any text to image system off the shelf that you may want to use. You'll provide a system prompt like man bit by spider, maybe climbing up the Empire State Building, and you get this grossly scary output. And that's probably not even close to what you had in mind. And certainly doesn't look anything like the Spider-Man that we know and love. And so there's clearly a gap here, right, between what the prompt is capturing about your intention and what the system ends up interpreting about your intention and the prompt, and what it then uses to, how it can then use that to actually generate something. There's a really big gap here that we think needs to be fixed. And so the core of what we're trying to build is not just text to X systems, but what we call context to X. And so what this means in practice is a context here on the input side can be an existing body of work, right? And that here can mean anything from a screenplay to a mood board, to maybe an existing season of a television show or even a film. And then our engine does a variety of different AI on top of that to then output what are typically pre-visualization assets, right? And pre-visualization assets might include mood boards, pitch decks, storyboards, video trailers, animatics. Just these are kind of smaller form derivative stories, like lightweight stories in different formats. And so what we're really trying to do is to leverage all that existing input and context, convert it, do some AI on top of it, and then allow you to really get a more cohesive output than just maybe feeding it into some text image system off the shelf. I'll stop here just really quickly and just feel the pulse on the room if there's any questions before I dive into the first wedge of what we're trying to build out.
Yeah, anyone have any question for me so far? I think, yeah, I definitely agree with the point about the important context, right? As a condition to have improve the quality of the generation. Yeah.
Cool. Take the silence as agreement or boredom. Either one is okay. I'll move on to first wedge of the tool that we, or the product suite that we're imagining. So one of the canonical outputs in pre-production and pre-visualization specifically is a storyboard. And I'm not sure how familiar the general audience is with the full pipeline of video production. It starts with sort of the pre-production, goes to production, and then there's the post-prod. And so pre-production is where a lot of the brainstorming, concepting happens. The production is where a lot of filming or animation happens, maybe for a film or a television show. And then the post-production is where a lot of the cleanup happens, right? Editing, adding of maybe special effects, things like that. So we focus a lot on that first phase, which is where a lot of the concepting and prototyping happens. Now, storyboarding is one of the canonical problems in video pre-production. And a storyboard, for those that are familiar with it, is effectively a translation of a script or some input that takes elements from the script and then converts that into kind of visual depictions of what a shot might look like. And so they typically tend to be very lightweight illustrations, maybe sketches, going from a scene to what this is going to look like. And the purpose of this tool, this output, what a storyboard is primarily to communicate things to different members of a production team when you go maybe on set to film something. So it's really like a technical document that might be 100+ pages describing in a lot of detail, hey, this is what this shot is going to look like for this scene. Then we're going to transition to another shot, etc. And really, it's meant to communicate a lot of information to the cinematographer, the director, anyone else who's on set. Now, the thing I want to call out here is that storyboarding is a very important part of pre-production, right? For a lot of folks, by the time you're on set, actually filming something or animating something, it's almost like too late in the sense that mistakes are incredibly costly. And a lot of folks that work on the production part of a process, of a video process, they hate to hear words like reshooting. They are constantly scared about unusable footage. And they recognize that a lot of times lack of preparation in earlier phases makes it by the time they're on set filming something, they might just completely have estimated how long something is going to take or where something should be. And at that point, it's a little bit late because now the mistakes are really, really expensive. So storyboarding is one of those things that can be done to make some of that process easier. And so you don't make as many of those mistakes in production. Now, why is storyboarding a really good application of generative AI? We believe there's a number of reasons guiding us. One is that it really enables, generative AI obviously enables very fast and versatile experimentation. So we can generate storyboards incredibly quickly. It's a very fault-tolerant problem, by which I mean to say that storyboards, as they're traditionally done, don't tend to be very high-fidelity illustrations. Usually they're like kind of like hand-drawn sketches, very lightweight, not meant to be super high detail. And so that means that the barrier to entry for a tool like generative AI isn't as high. And then finally, generative AI is under a lot of fire these days because people are concerned about IP concerns, who owns what does it mean to have a derivative work, who's actually responsible for that, who gets royalties for that. There is less concern if you focus on things like pre-production for generative AI, namely because there is a status quo already in the industry, for example, in film and television, where people take shots from existing films or shows to communicate ideas. Like this is just like a standard practice that people do. So it's less concerning from an IP standpoint to maybe apply generative AI to something that already typically rips off of other people's work, rips off, quote unquote. But yeah, that is, that's what I want to call out there. And then from what does the state of storyboarding look like today? The reality is that a lot of storyboarding that is done today is people will, a director, someone who's a screenwriter that has just finished a screenplay will go to a storyboard artist and will say, hey, here's my script, here's my pages, and I want you to illustrate each of these shots. And so what ends up happening in practice is that an illustrator needs to go hand draw these sketches, maybe take weeks, months, there's back and forth revisions that need to happen. So there's a communication latency between people. And it's a very costly process. So we actually ran some experiments where we took screenplay elements. We commissioned a storyboard artist to go and illustrate this to get a sense for like roughly what this is going to take like from a cost and time perspective. So we just had them illustrate a handful of shots from a screenplay. And these are actual numbers. So it took maybe about $40, roughly around a few days to get back those shots as they were. And this is just a handful of frames. So this is maybe what the status quo looks like today. When you apply a generative AI solution like ours, the economics are completely inverted on their head. For the exact same scene elements, we can have, our cost is maybe $1 to generate the exact same elements. It might take only a handful of minutes, and we can do the generation for an entire film or an entire, maybe hundreds of scene elements, compared to just the few frames that a hand-drawn illustrator can get done. On top of that, one added benefit here that isn't mentioned is that generative AI solutions tend to be more richly expressive, right? Like in the sense that you are not restricted to these like hand-drawn sketches the way an illustrator might produce on the left here. You can actually generate very sophisticated photorealistic elements, things that are stylistically derived from other works. And so what it enables is a whole new universe of experimentation for a director or an artistic individual or creative who wants to actually start exploring their vision for a work. So I'll pause there, and if there are any questions, otherwise I will just transition to a demo.
How do you judge the quality of the storyboard that's generated? Even though you're crafting something, are you looking for milestones, or like how do you actually guide the narrative that's being crafted?
Sorry, guide the narrative from the, like, how do we know we're interpreting the screen elements correctly, or you mean something else?
Like, how good is the story? Like, how good is the story that's being generated?
Yeah. A notoriously difficult problem, and this is the problem, I would say, not just for storyboarding, but just any sort of image generation systems. It turns out there's very poor support in terms of the research around how to properly evaluate whether even an image is properly understanding an image is properly understanding an input prompt. Usually it's a combination of automated metrics, which are not always great. And there's some research that shows that these automated metrics they're good proxies for human judgment. They have like high correlation with what a human would typically rate in terms of quality. But then oftentimes the default here as well is just actually having people run like A/B tests on maybe one output generated versus another. And so from our perspective, when we were like refining some of our models, refining some of the systems we put in the back end, we are trying to run these analyses on the images that are being generated. And then by the time it's surfaced to a user from our product, they're not really worrying about that. So in a sense, there's like two folds. There's two kinds of evaluation. There's the stuff that we do on our back end to make sure that our systems that we surface is good. And then there's just the user, right? Like they will decide what they like and they don't like. By the time
So there is oh, sorry, I was just going to say, so there is a component of like reinforcement learning, or at least just like feedback that you're using in order to tune the nature of the responses after a storyboard is being produced.
Not yet. It's a really good idea, and it's an astute observation. We are collecting that data in the sense of like what people are, because I'll show in the tool, there's an aspect of being able to like kind of iterate on shots. So we do get some of that feedback. However, we are not yet putting in like an RLHF system or something like that to continuously kind of loop through our system and kind of feed that information back into our system. So not yet, cool. But that's a really good, it's like a product milestone on the roadmap.
Cool. That makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, at your stage, that makes a ton of sense. I think the last question is, I think from a bottoms up perspective, a tool like this makes a ton of sense. Have you back tested this on like, the Batman trilogy and said like, hey, take the synopsis of like a blockbuster movie and generate a storyboard?
Yeah. Yes. So it's that's also a really good observation. Here's one thing. We have run it through a number of existing scripts, and we've seen what that looks like. Now, so there's kind of two ways to interpret it. One, you might think you want to assess the fidelity or the quality of a model by seeing how much does it compare to an existing storyboard, and that might be a reasonable way to do it. One problem with that approach is really hard to get a hold of storyboards they're not really like shared. You can't really find them all. We actually really struggle to get access to any storyboards for existing works out there. You're just not gonna. It's just not an easy thing to get a hold of. So it makes it hard to do that. evaluation where you have kind of like the gold reference compared to the thing you've generated. And then the second thing is, it's not clear that you necessarily want to emulate exactly this style, right? These like hand-drawn sketches. You can maybe test the system's ability to generate hand-drawn sketches, but as I'll show, what we're trying to offer is even more expressive than that. How would you evaluate a photorealistic understanding or a photorealistic interpretation of the Batman films if all you have is storyboards that are hand-drawn sketches? So there will always be a huge mismatch on comparing those two. So in a sense, like the problem is a little bit ill-formed because we're offering like a different functionality compared to what the status quo would be.
That makes a ton of sense. Thank you for answering my questions.
You're good. You're good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Tristan. Michael, I also saw you unmute. Do you have any question for Mihail?
I do not. I'm just very familiar with the process, so looking forward to the demo.
Beautiful.
Oh, there you go. There you go. John, look at John unmute.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is everything you've been doing kind of based on is it taking the information from scripts, or have you gotten detailed into like, is it able to interpolate shot list in a specific, that would be, and maybe that's in the demo, but I was just curious, like, because these are from the script, but the script sometimes doesn't necessarily allocate like medium, close up, wide camera movement, but a shot list would detail that out, etc. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah. It's a good question. Right now, we're only interpreting scripts. We have a lot of plans to interpret, some of that metadata that you're referring to that would come from a shot list, as well as, in one of the slides that I showed is a little bit aspirational in the sense of like, what kind of inputs could you provide to someone? Could you provide to a system like this to be able to inform some of these generated storyboards? What you can also imagine, again, aspirationally, is feeding in, if you're doing kind of season 2 of maybe some show or something, you already have some sense for the visual style of something from season 1, right? So you already have a sense of what something should look like, and you want to, in a way, emulate that visual aesthetic. That would be also something you could conceivably want to feed to a system like this. So inputs around shot list, absolutely good idea. Inputs around existing footage, good idea. Maybe existing just sketches from maybe graphical artists or concept artists to guide some of the generation of what exactly you want. We don't have that support yet, but that is absolutely on the roadmap. And I think it's a good direction to take some of this.
Awesome. Do you want to continue with the demo? I think I'd love to see.
Thank you for the questions. A lot of really, really good points. I will now hop to the demo. Okay, so this is our application, which we went live technically as of maybe like 1.5, 2 weeks ago. So we're now just at a place where we iterate on the tool quite a bit, and then now, in a sense, like anyone could publicly go and access this and start playing with it. So a lot of these ideas are on the roadmap; they're not there yet. But I'd like to share what we have so far and maybe describe some of the use cases for where folks have ended up leveraging some of the systems that we have. So when you get on the tool, we have a number of sample boards available to individuals, and so you can see what some of these boards look like here, where one example is you take an existing script like the one for women talking, and you can generate a stylistic depiction of those shots, maybe 100 plus scenes from that thing in the style of like a Grand Budapest Hotel, right? Like Wes Anderson, very distinct style, a lot of pastels, a lot of kind of very, very rich looking images. And so you can do that. And here, the way to interpret this, what's being done is you have the shots that are generated in the middle, but what the thing on the right is really those scene elements that you're interpreting the semantics of, and then using that to generate the kind of the shots in the middle. So you can do this for women talking, but one of the value adds, of course, as I mentioned, is being able to infer different styles and different things that aren't just Wes Anderson is one, but you go to the exact same script, apply it to like the Handmaid's Tale. You have a very different aesthetic, right? Again, same input scene elements, but a very different aesthetic because the visual appearance of the style is very distinct. And so these are just some of the pre-generated things that you can see. But for the purposes of this demo, I'll walk through just kind of what the flow looks like if you're coming on this for the first time and maybe starting to play with this and you want to do you want to upload your own script or work. When you go to actually creating your own board, the way I would look at this is you have a number of different ways you can input things. You can either just provide a PDF right, of maybe a script or screenplay. This could be, we support things that are standardly formatted, like something that would come out of a final draft if people are familiar with that technology. You can also provide sort of like, we have this rudimentary support for providing like single scenes in a line at a time, and then not forcing you to subject yourself to formatting it like a PDF of a screenplay would look like. And then if you want to just like kind of get up and running with the tool, we also have just like sample scripts we've uploaded. So these are a handful of films, some of which people may know from existing films that are out there. And so you can just like pull one of these if you want. But for the purposes of the demo, I'll just try and plug in what Oz the I'll plug in my own script. So just a PDF that I pulled off the off my system. And at this point, we have kind of two phases of AI that's happening here. One is really processing some sort of long form script or screenplay format to run just an understanding on top of those scene elements, to break them up, maybe extract some of the characters, interpret some of the semantics of those scene elements. And then from there, that's kind of like the language processing part of the problem. We then feed that understanding into more of the text to image side. And really it's two levels of intelligence that need to happen there. Just to give a sense for what it looks like once you've processed a script, you have all the scene elements that have been parsed out of the PDF. Each of these is its own scene element that has been extracted, right? So these are just like one maybe set of log lines from an existing from the script that I uploaded. You can pick a handful of ones that you want. You can obviously search. So there's search functionality to do that. So I'll just like pick a few script scene elements from this to actually generate. At this point, you can kind of pick the style that you want. So we have a few supported styles out of the box. You can also provide your own input, so freeform text input. The results may vary because the system only knows so much. And our goal is eventually to support the long tail of styles. So artistically, there's so many other styles that you can pull from that aren't just these 10 or so available. How do you give people that playground to play with any style they want? Just for starters here, I'll pull one that we support that is pretty well supported, which is the Blade Runner aesthetic. At this point, you can, we've designed our system to be modular in the sense that you, on the one hand, for the image generation side of it, you can pick either an off-the-shelf system, kind of like a Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, but we're also working on finding our own systems, our own models that can learn some of these aesthetics a little more closely. And again, when it comes down to it, we're happy to have people use whatever tool they want to do this image generation. And we've designed the system in such a way to be modular in that way. For the purposes of just time, I'll pull in Stable Diffusion. And at this point, we picked out 7 scenes from that script that I pulled from my computer, which was Pizza Girl, which is an unproduced script that came off of this year's Blacklist. So at this point, what's happening is more parsing is happening of the script. We're then feeding each of those scene elements to a text to image generation system, and then we're generating each of those scene elements in the style that we picked out, which in this case was the Blade Runner film. So it should a little bit while longer, and then it'll you'll see kind of the generated look and feel of the work in the Blade Runner style. Okay, well, you can also see, I guess I know I was hanging up on that last scene element there, but you can see as the processing is happening. Yeah, so I guess now it's completely done. So I'll just click to the view. Let's refresh this. Yeah, so again, very similar look and feel of what I described, where you're interpreting the scene, kind of the scene semantics, processing the scene semantics, kind of running that language processing, that language understanding, reinterpreting and formulating it as a prompt that might highlight some of the key aspects from the log lines, and then generating the shot. And so you see this again done for all of the shots that we just put in. We kind of support 10 out of the box, but you can certainly scale this up as much as you want. It's all done sort of in parallel, so you can scale this up even beyond this. The other thing I want to call out here is, you have these shots. Certainly here you can actually see what kind of thing we interpreted from the semantics and when we ran our language processing. You also may want to like kind of edit some of these shots, and so you have the ability to like kind of run some processing and filtering and things like that on top of the shots. So maybe you might annotate it and say like maybe you'll write a text here, like some note or something. You can actually run that. You can maybe apply different filters to get maybe a different look and feel more directly. And then maybe once you're happy, you can apply those changes, and then they'll be sort of visible to kind of play with there. Oh. Sorry, let me just do that again. Okay, not really sure where that image went. It should be kind of visible here, so maybe look into that. You can also do another thing here, which is maybe you have additional shots that you want to include here. So maybe this is maybe one shot for the scene that you kind of picked out, but you may want to add like another shot here. So this is maybe the existing prompt from the shot that you saw, but maybe you'll say, because we're talking about Pizza Girl, one of the which is the script title. So I do like a young woman eating a piece of pizza, which is the lead narrator is a young woman who's a pizza delivery person.
Are you defining that it's the same woman from the previous scene, or is it just going to generate a new woman?
Yeah, that's a good point. So it is generated from scratch here, but one of the things that we are working on here and where we've gotten a lot of requests is people want to break up this process even a little more modularly, in the sense that they want to maybe define their own character look, right? And that might come from a graphical artist or concept artist, or just even like your own sketch that you want to upload. And then the goal there would be to, given those things that would also maybe be defined in kind of the early stages of the processing, you would then feed that into the system, and then it would maintain the consistency of that character across time. So here it is independent. We try and preserve as much of the, we try and preserve as much character consistency as we can. What I will say though here is we are, because you're providing the prompt from scratch, it's sort of largely redefining all the kind of the settings that we had for the existing board. So yeah, here it'll probably end up looking slightly different. You can try and approximate the exact look and feel based on some of the based on the prompt that you derive from when you add a shot. Also, I guess this isn't how. Now we're getting all those shots that we uploaded. Yeah, so added another shot here, which again kind of is included in this running board. And the idea really here is to make it relatively straightforward and maybe even fun, you might say, to actually iterate on shots, play with them, leverage sort of the state of the art of generative systems to build off, clean up shots, maybe play with them in different ways, adapt different styles, and to kind of do things like that. So really it's meant to be an interactive process where you're really able to kind of follow your creative whimsy is how we like to think about it. And then once, we also provide support for maybe changing like a global style. So if you wanted to change the entire style of a film relatively quickly, you could just go and this would apply the stylistic change across all the shots. And then once you're kind of good and happy, you can just download each of those assets and then send them off to either team members or depending on what your use case exactly is. So that's kind of the gist of it. And I will pause there in case people have any thoughts or questions.
There's a question in the chat from Michael. He asked, can you define ahead of time how many shots per scene?
Yeah, so not yet, but I do think that's also sort of a thing that people have asked for, because a lot of the times for maybe each of one of these scene, well, maybe yes and no is the question, is the answer. So you can add a shot on top of like manually. You're not able to configure it maybe in the first input pipeline that I showed. So you can't do like, hey, give me 3 shots per scene. But if you wanted to, you could add a shot here one at a time and then kind of start from there.
I have a question for you. So this is actually really good. I'm involved storyboarding, so I know how much work goes into creating that and how expensive it can be. So in our platform, we have a feature for in our publishing system for people that they write comic books.
Yeah.
They can come and publish their comic book. So the way we have set it up, you can go ahead and take a look at it later on, is nivafy.com. So right now we're creating pre-made templates. So basically the artist comes, they upload their own picture, they put their, their text, and they create a comic book. So we're working on something like this. But the problem we have is that no matter what you do, you can never get the same character. It always keep, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But the way you have created is actually works way better than we're doing. But have you find any solution for that?
Yeah, it's not an easy problem. I mean, I can't say that we've like completely solved it. For sure, I don't think we've completely solved it. The most simple answer is to really try and do very targeted prompting, right, of the system, and you might get something kind of similar-ish across prompt generations, like if you really zero in on some of the details of character. But when it comes to really like exactly sort of the look and feel of something, there are a handful of approaches that we've looked at, and they're a combination of like LoRa's that maybe exist out there, and so there's a handful of techniques that we've looked at, and we're continuing to look at. I would say that we haven't like completely solved the problem, but I'm happy to kind of keep talking about it and maybe share some of the notes that we have around what that process looks like, because it's an important one. I mean, I think it's one that most people end up even asking for, right? It's just, how do you ensure that something looks consistent over time?
And my other question is, do you collaborate with other platforms? Is there any way somebody can integrate your system into their platform?
Yeah, not right now. We have sort of partners that use our tool. And so we partnered with folks and studios that leverage what we're using, and a lot of our use cases come from filmmakers and folks in kind of creative agencies. So we have people that use the tool, but we have not integrated maybe in a way that, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting the kind of integration you have in mind correctly, but we haven't exposed like an API where people are able to call the API and then leverage our technology in the back end. We've considered that. We haven't got enough pull yet on that functionality to like really invest the time and resources to build out an API. But I mean, we're always open to exploring possibilities if people have a very strong use case.
Yeah, I meant API, because right now we build on top of a stability for our AI system called Realized Dream. So we build on top of a stability, Sandra for music and ChatGPT for text generator. That's what I meant.
Yeah. So we own expose an API. We've had like maybe 1 or 2 people ask for this. We probably would need a little bit more of a I would say like a inflection point in terms of requests to really maybe invest the time and resources. So it's not like highest priority for us, but that's not to say that it won't eventually be something we support.
I have a question with my years of editing films is on that second shot that you just added with the girl eating a pizza. If I wasn't satisfied with that and said maybe a wider shot or kind of the camera, can I change that particular one to be a slightly different variation on that theme?
Yeah, this is a good point. So we had support for that a little bit, and we ended up kind of last minute dishing it a little bit to get this more involved, almost like photo editing type of functionality. So we almost like we swapped it out for this because we thought this looked a little bit sleeker. But we did support that originally. And we still, in a sense, do have that code sitting somewhere in our code base. We just haven't surfaced that in the UI because we're trying not to overwhelm people with the options here. But yeah, we had that. We just haven't exposed it in the front end. And we actually did at one point have that. We just sort of talked ourselves out of it.
I couldn't just on this one say regenerate as a wider angle.
Yeah, right. So literally that's what we had. And then so here it's not available on the front end, but yes. So like what you're describing, I'm 100% aware of. We have the code, we just haven't serviced it. So I mean, in a sense, it'd be quite easy to put that out there.
Yep.
Ron, do you have a question?
I do. Because you're kind of, I believe this one was like with a Blade Runner aspect, right? This was just for the purposes of the demo. How much Blade Runner are you giving it, so to speak? Like how much, like, is there a minimum, maximum? The more you give it, does it, how much are you kind of, pointing it in that direction, and how much do you need? And did you find that there was like a point where you kind of gave too much that it kind of veered off the mark, or is there like a sweet spot, or, is it based on a dozen images, 200 images, in terms of like mood?
In practice, it depends. I would say that in experiments that we've run, the look and feel of something, it can be, tens, like under 100. And in cases where something is like very, very distinct, it can be more like made less distinct is the right way to put this. It's a little more work. And I say that because a lot of the demo styles that we picked out were intended to be very, like, kind of glaringly obvious where they came from, especially when you look at something like a Wes Anderson. It's unequivocally Wes Anderson. And so those styles are easier to emulate from kind of a model perspective. When we've run some experiments, we can get really well, we can get generally pretty good results on the order of like hundreds of images. That being said, it's a trade-off, right? It's a trade-off because you can end up overfitting on a style. And sometimes one issue that models may run into is you end up forgetting some basic human, in some cases, human generation capabilities, or just general generation capabilities for some other aspects of a shot. So you have to, it ends up being an empirical question of how often something will work. But, we've seen good results with hundreds. Conceivably, something could work with fewer, but you kind of just need to run the model and see what is learned.
Great. Any other question from you, from the audience? Yeah, maybe I'm curious from a technical sort of like backend perspective, right? What are some of the issues that you encounter in order to like generate these scenes fast? Like, how do you like reduce that latency inference in the front end? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of front end solutions and there's back end solutions. Front end is obviously things, but some of the things you can do obviously are like lazy. I said not obviously, but then I said obviously again. You can do things like lazy loading. You can kind of run multiple processes, although the multiple processes is more on the back end side. Everything that we run when we generate, we'll feed hundreds of scene elements, and then we're just like spawning off processes like crazy. And so each of these processes is sending like a request or query to some underlying system. So we heavily parallelize things, and that way a lot of stuff is getting generated in tandem. And that's something that we've made kind of a core piece of the system, because if you did everything serially, it wouldn't be like that much. I mean, it would just take a lot longer, right? We can generate maybe an entire script for a film in like an order of minutes. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've just heavily streamlined that process of backend processing, sending off things to models. And then on the front end side, I don't think there's like anything too sophisticated other than like lazy loading. And like I would say the bulk of the heavy lifting is happening really on the backend side. Yeah, and we're learning like AWS, standard SageMaker kind of stuff.
Yeah, Peter got another question in the chat. He asked, could your system be trained from another system like shotdeck.com, where they have a ton of metadata attributes that could be leveraged?
Sorry, which system? What was the suggestion around what system to use?
Shotdeck.com.
Oh yes, yeah. It's a good suggestion. So one piece of like support that we have is, and we want to build out more of this, is when you're trying to build out a new image or a new shot, you can certainly prompt things. We have some things like being able to some more high level coarse tuning abilities, whether that's like coarse grain, here's camera angle, here's like lighting, things like that. And then one thing that we have some amount of support for is providing like inspiration images. So these are like shots that you would provide that are so you're not starting from scratch. You're like, hey, I want this to look kind of like this, and I don't want to prompt it. I want you to just look at the image and kind of emulate the style of that image. So this is one place where you could see yourself conceivably putting in like a shot deck image. We haven't done any like large scale training on shot deck images, but I do think that's a good idea.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question, Peter. Great. John, you have another question?
Yeah, like based on where you just were, where was that kind of drop down?
Yes.
So that, and then style, camera angle, lighting, inspiration image, is that per image then? Or is that per the whole project? I guess I got confused right there.
Per image, yeah. So this is like, this flow is you're now about to add a new shot, and now you can add these extra attributes, which will try and guide the image generation on that shot, on the shot that you're trying to generate toward maybe either being extreme close-up or or being.
And that would then regenerate the initial shot that it gave you, or just add like an additional shot after it.
So this would generate from scratch. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So your product is already available, right? Anyone can
Available, yeah. So feel free to play with it, make an account, check it out. Feel free to triage and break it and all that good stuff. It's, as I should qualify, we've been public about a week and a half, 2 weeks. So there's certainly going to be expect some trickiness here and there, and the UI UX we're still trying to figure out exactly. But we're now at that point where we felt we could just throw it out into the world, see how people used it, and yeah, there's a lot more to do, many more places to go, and I'm impressed. A lot of the questions were it's like you guys are like reading our roadmap. Like I was like, well, this is why don't we just do at this point, like who should we hire here? Because you guys are like kind of thinking exactly about what we're doing. So very impressed.
Yeah. There's another question in the chat from Adrian. Yes, do you utilize chunking?
Sorry, chunking?
I think it means like video chunking. Is it, Adrian? Is that what you mean?
I don't know if that applies here though.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll maybe, if I'm interpreting it correctly, but I may not be. When you want to like fine tune a system, you do have to, like, one way of maybe providing data to like train a system is you can feed in like shots of that kind of footage from existing films, and there you can take like frames. So you are like taking frames of images if you want, but I'm not sure if that's the answer.
Yeah. Great.
Very cool.
Look at this chat. Nice. We almost at the top of the hour. Yeah, a lot super engaging and informative session from Mihail. Actually, I have another question to maybe brought up, given your background, because it seems like you're coming from a very like ML research background, right? And then now you work on this project that is very almost like at the far end applications how to think, right? And because like this group really focused on multimodal AI and some video AI, right? Curious to get your perspective on how the field is going to evolve, right? Like video understanding, multimodal AI, Gen AI in general, and how some of the development from LLMs and some previous generation of machine learning going to influence the way that we view the adoption of these this part. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that the search problem is gonna, like, vector search is gonna underlie, I think, everything. I mean, and in that way, I think 12 Labs is like really positioning itself very well. Is any sort of a vector DB index over vectors, embeddings, or any kind of modality, whether that's textual embeddings, image embeddings, video-based embeddings, any of that stuff, I think will power a lot of this. It's just it's a more efficient and more powerful way to do search. And I think there's so much of this data being produced that search is going to be incredibly important to feed into systems, to prompt systems, all that stuff. So that I see is like obviously inevitable. I mean, that this is just like a very clear next step and where a lot of this technology is going. From a technology and maybe some of these other generation capabilities, I think there's a lot more to happen, certainly in the video gen side. I mean, you have a few players like Runway that are trying to work on that and have maybe shown some interesting results with their Gen 1, Gen 2 systems. That still has a long way to go. I mean, even image generation has a long way to go, but video has like a whole long way to go. I mean, really, you get these nice 5, 10, 15-second clips, which might be okay, but to get things to the point where they're usable in an actual production capacity, that is a whole different level of quality. And I'm sure a lot of folks here can speak to that. It's just not this. It's one thing to have kind of a nice Twitter demo and something that would go viral. That's all nice and good. But for someone to actually use a shot in an actual capacity, people aren't going to take most of the things. They're just not going to be good enough. I think to get to that level of quality, that will take more time, right? And I don't want to have a recording of me saying exactly how long that'll take, because that's one way to be proven wrong and have that surfaced years from now when you're like, well, you said this. But yeah, I do think that tech will get better. It will take some time. And in a sense, our motivation as a company, a lot of the way we started with some of this pre-prod stuff is because of that fault tolerance argument I made, which is you want to start with something that's tractable, given technology today, that you can still provide value to people. And then eventually, as things get better, I could see us evolving into like video gen and a lot of other things too. But we want to always kind of keep pace with what's actually usable and doable at this point in time, right? So a lot more to come. I think I expect that the technology, and there's so much investment and interest in research right now that my mind is blown. I mean, I've been in AI like well over a decade. And so I've seen a few different like phases of like hype in AI. Like I can think of, a few different periods of time where people were already getting hyped about it. And each time I'm like, this feels like it's kind of saturated. And this level of interest in the last year is like totally blows everything out the water. I mean, in terms of how much people are thinking about this. So I think there's so many smart people working on these problems that we're just going to come up with a lot of really good solutions.
Yeah, great. I think that's a very optimistic way to conclude our session. Yeah, we are at the top of the hour. Thanks a lot, Mihail, for giving the demo and giving the presentation on the story, building Storia AI and the product to help shape the future of storytelling for media and entertainment practitioner. We'll have the recording of this webinar available on YouTube in about like 2 weeks or so. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we run the session on a weekly basis. So we'd love to have you come back next week for more talks on multimodal AI.
I guess I'm on the Discord. I don't know if people want to reach out to me. I'll be on the Discord, but also James, feel free to share my email if people are interested.
A lot of folks already asked in the chat and share the recording. So yeah, as I mentioned, join our Discord and reach out to me if you have any further FAQs for you.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Long weekend. Yeah.
All right, have a good one. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, James, again.
Thank you.